interesting and informative lineup for you, and I hope you'll bear with us if we have any technical hitches, as this is our very first event of this kind. This event is being recorded so that we can save parts of the event for future use, but if anyone has any concerns about this, please just contact us after the event. To start the evening, I'm going to hand over to the chairman of FQMS, Khalid Dawas, who will introduce the Palestinian ambassador and then say a few words about the work of FQMS. Khalid.
Thank you, Anjum. And I would say it's lovely to see you all, but it is certainly a pleasure that so many people have joined us today. We've got people calling from pretty much all parts of the world apart from Australia. I think it was too late in the day over there. I did try with a couple of friends, but they refused. So I'm sure they'll miss us, and they'll miss a great program that we have for you today. There are a few things I'd like to tell you about as part of what's been happening over the last year. And I'm going to show you some slides just so that it helps us and helps you visualize. And also there are some things which might cheer us up. So last year, when I showed you these slides, I had a picture of Gaza. It was a beach in Gaza that was apparent, and now this is a picture of Jerusalem. As you know, the theme of this year is about Jerusalem, Quds Medical School, and Jerusalem. And these are the kind of things. These are the pictures that we miss. Those of us who go to visit Palestine and Jerusalem regularly, go and visit Jerusalem, which is a magical city. And you can see the Damascus Gate and the gate to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which are really quite special. And if you ever go there, then these are sites that you must try and go and see, though there is some difficulty, as you can imagine. Before I go any further, I'd like to first of all introduce our ambassador, Dr. Husam Zomlot, who is a great supporter of ours. He's a friend to all of us. And he has been in position now in the UK for nearly 3 years. And before that, you may know he was head of mission in Washington, DC, and experienced all the pleasures of dealing with the outgoing American administration. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Zomlot to give us a few words. So Husam, I'm just going to ask you to unmute, please, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And just give me a moment to allow you in.
Hello, Khalid, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yes.
Yeah, good evening, Khalid, my friends, ladies and gentlemen. I also see Professor Colin Green, all of our friends here. It is truly a pleasure and an honor to be here today with you. And thank you, of course, Dr. Khalid Dawas, both for your invitation to me to speak today, say a few words, and for your invaluable efforts over the years. Al-Quds Foundation for Medical School in Palestine has over the years done great work, really, and I have been following this since the 90s, educating our medical professionals and supporting our medical schools and the medical sector in general. This is always important, but right now it is absolutely crucial. It's a life-saving exercise, if I may say. Like the rest of the world, the Palestinian people is suffering a global pandemic. Unfortunately, unlike the rest of the world, we are doing so while living under a belligerent and hostile military occupation. We will have heard, all of us would have heard, how Israel has been loaded over rolling out a vaccine program faster than anyone else in the world. You will also have been reading and following and hearing that that program excludes us, the Palestinian people. More than 5 million Palestinians in the occupied territory under Israel's rule. It even excludes, workers, Palestinian workers working in Palestine. It excludes Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli jails. It is unbelievable that, prison guards received the vaccination while political prisoners didn't. Anyway, this is truly contrary to international law, to common morality, and frankly, as you know very well, scientists and doctors, it's contrary to common sense. It is discriminatory and racist, it's immoral, but this is the reality we live in. This is the reality of occupation. Unlike Israel, COVID-19 does not care if you are Israeli or not. This is one thing we all could learn from this cursed virus, this situation we are in for the last many months. And I don't want to dwell into politics. This is about QFMS. This is about your great efforts. But in a few words, the last 4 years have been really tough on us, the Palestinian people, I must say. And the Trump administration was a real challenge. It was a challenge to many, but in our case, the case of Palestine and the Palestinians, it was almost an existential challenge and threat. I'm glad and proud to say that we stood up firm, very firm, to Trump. We stood up to his attempts to erase us from the agenda and erase us from history. And we did not waver or budge when he tried and his administration to buy our enslavements in a pretend state or bully us even by withholding funding and aid. And we never gave up, my friends, on our aim to achieve our freedom and independence in our own sovereign state of Palestine on the 1967 borders, in spite of everything in the last 4 years that Israel and the most radically pro-settlement American leadership have thrown at us. And I assure you, I was, as you know, the ambassador to the US. I know a little bit about what they have thrown at us. They have really thrown a lot at us. Yet we are here. We see a new dawn. Yesterday's announcement and decree by President Abbas to convene national elections is a very welcomed development, very good news. We must end the Palestinian division and renew our democratic process. That's the bedrock, if you may, of our survival and eventually liberation and return. We remain firm on our principles, and we need to prepare and educate our generations. And here I come back to the Quds Foundation. This is all what you are about, and your investment is in the right place. It is about strengthening our medical sector to withstand not just the normal pressure any medical sector comes under, even in extraordinary times like these, but the extra normal pressures the Palestinian health sector faces, pressures of occupation, deprivation, isolation, and belligerence. So none have done so more than you, none has done so longer than you have done it, Quds Foundation, and you have been with us from our first medical school at Quds University to now, and we have more than 4 medical schools with 3 more recognized medical schools across the occupied territories, from Gaza to Nablus. On behalf of the Palestinian leadership, of the Palestinian people, allow me, Dr. Dawas, to express our gratitude for these efforts and this vital work, and wish you a very successful event. Thank you.
Sam, thank you very much for your very kind words, and as always, really informative and inspirational. I've met you a few times, as you know, and I think we can see the energy that you have, which is infectious, and long may it continue. And it's nice to see you in person now as well. I should add that Dr. Zomlot and his whole family have had coronavirus recently, so we're even more grateful that you could make it today. We were worried that last week you might not be feeling so well, but I'm glad you're feeling better.
I'm absolutely good. I'm fine.
So I shall go back now to the presentation I was talking to you about. Now, my first slide is one really to try and help you relax. So this is certainly what I would like to be doing, and I'm sure many of you would feel the same way. This happens to be in Cyprus from a trip recently, which I managed to just about make sometime in the summer. And when I look at the sea, I always relax anyway. Now, FQMS in the last year has been active. Of course, we've had to reprioritize. We've had to change our approach. We've had a few items that we've had to tick off and continue with our very tight governance. So the gala dinner last year that some of you might have attended was a success. We managed to just get in, I think, before the coronavirus lockdown affected all of us. And it seems like such a long time ago. But I did manage to today, probably for the 3rd time in a year, put on a shirt and a tie. And I hope you like it. We also had to reprioritize our events, our funding programs. So some of our programs that you might have heard of in the past, we support medical students to travel overseas for electives. And though you may argue that at the medical school level, the benefit from that may be limited, in fact, it gives them a huge amount of insight into how things work elsewhere. It inspires many students to follow the careers that they may find exciting when they do visit foreign hospitals, and it gives them a chance to breathe. We really do think that's important. It gives many of the Palestinian students who find traveling extremely difficult a chance to breathe. And as an example, a common remark we get is the surprise about how traveling from London to Birmingham does not require passports. We've also had to change slightly our approach to our funding. We've curtailed, obviously, our activities because they're much more face-to-face normally. What we're doing today was an idea that we've been thinking about now and in the planning process for probably 3 months. So it does still take a lot of time. And as you know, most of us, in fact, all of us, apart from our fantastic operations manager, Rita, are volunteers. So we do this in our spare time. On the governance side, we are very excited that we're welcoming some new trustees. We've got 4 of them on, 3 of them on today. And we're very excited that Electra Simon, Yasmin Tabak, Harris Kiani, and Nasir Chia have joined us as trustees. They bring with them energy, they bring with them a different perspective. They're not medics, apart from Yasmin, who I know from work as well. And she is very good as a doctor too. But they come with them, they bring with them different ideas, and we really are excited about the prospect of what they bring to the table. We still continue with our regular trustee meetings, which we've done throughout the year. In fact, they've probably become more frequent, and they've also become later at night. So we tend to now meet at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. and it goes on for an hour or two. And sometimes perhaps we're a little bit tired. But actually, the group that we have as a group of trustees, which makes FQMS work and tick so well, is really a good group of people who are very professional. And also, since we take our governance so seriously, we, in fact, are proud to say that we were approached by the Charity Commission to look into our activities, into our financing. And this is something that I think many charities experience. So there's usually an issue that they want clarification on, but it meant that we had to go through our governance aspects of our charity very, very carefully. And we had a very good meeting with them back in June. It took a few months for them to come up with the report, but the report actually is very positive. Of course, we expect some kind of guidance, but certainly there was nothing untoward that came up as a result of that. Now, for those of you who like skiing, again, just a picture to relax and think of the snow, these lovely trees, and this happens to be in Switzerland, I believe. And again, just a moment to switch off and think of other things. Now, we at FQMS still focus on medical students primarily in the medical schools. And though we do have a program which looks at postgraduate training, and as part of that, we have trainees who have finished their training in different specialties in Palestine who come out to the UK on a clear designated program, which is sponsored by the Royal Colleges here in the UK. They spend 2 years with us. We've had a variety of people coming in with different specialties, and they don't just learn about really working in their own subspecialties, but they also learn about the different aspects of medical work in the UK. It's very varied. There's the importance of governance, audit, the importance of running a system, being able to be part of a system which is much more coherent than in many other countries. And I think one of the major strengths of the UK NHS system is the fact that it is interlinked, and there is a high level of minimum safety that we all take for granted here in the UK, which we need to pass on elsewhere, whether it's in Palestine or elsewhere. And we maintain, again, a very respectable percentage of administration costs that we run, so it's less than 15% of our total income. We rely on our partnerships, as all charities do, and we hope to expand those in the future. And those of you who are cyclists, perhaps, so this is the summit of Mont Ventoux, which is a famous spot at the on the Tour de France. This is, as you can see, it's altitude 1911 meters, and you have a fantastic view. It looks like a moon crater when you get to the top. This is not me showing off. These are probably pictures I've nicked from other people. So I'm not by any means trying to show off that I've done all these things, but I would aspire. I would like to, at the end, have mentioned 2 people that have really made a big contribution to our fundraising this year. Dalia Salam Rishani, who is forever really one of our most loyal and generous donors with her husband. And has contributed really a large amount of money as usual this year. And David Shove, who is a long-term supporter, who's supported lots of activities in Palestine. And in fact, he will not mind me saying that he donated in excess of 60,000 New Zealand dollars to a specific hospital in Gaza, as he was inspired by one of his friends who worked out there for a few years in pediatric cardiac surgery. We are aiming for a minimum of £60,000 this year. We appreciate that everyone is stretched, tempers afraid, people are stressed about what's going on. So we are, I think, much more realistic about our targets this year, but still we would like to raise between 60 and 75,000 to maintain the minimum level of program funding that we would like to do and we would aspire to do for the medical students and their schools. Our aims are really to look at funding a large population of students, but also to fund excellence. So we are shifting slightly towards funding excellence and helping the medical schools with big capital projects that will benefit a larger number of students. The FQMS trustees have changed, as I've said to you. I would like to thank Mahmoud Al-Bustami, who has retired as a trustee this year. Mahmoud has been with us for many, many years, in fact, probably nearly 20 years, and has had an immense contribution to the board. Mahmoud's a cardiologist and a fantastic cardiologist. He works in just north of London. Apart from being a very good trustee and a good friend to most of us, and to all of us, in fact, who've come across him, he's also a very good chef, I hear. But I've yet to taste his, I think his manaish are the ones that Lena Nash tells me are fantastic. And as I mentioned, the 4 new trustees on the side, Electra, Yasmin, Harris, and Nasir. Rita, you all know, everyone knows Rita. And Ruben remains our treasurer. And thank you, Ruben, for what you do. These are, again, our snapshot of our partners. And we continue to expand. We continue to seek new partnerships. This is what really keeps charities going. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm going to hand back to Anjum. And this is just a photograph to remind you that in the last 4 years now, we've had a few obstacles, but nevertheless, we push on, we continue on. The cause is great. People are very, very grateful for the support that you give us, which we can pass on to them.
Thank you so much, Ambassador and Khalid. I have to say, I forgot that we were snowed out one year. So before we go any further, I would like to remind you that we have a number of prints for sale today by Daisy Perkins. Daisy is an artist specialising in oil painting and charcoal and has trained and taught at the London Fine Arts Studio. She's been a supporter of us at FQMS since she travelled to Palestine and has produced this beautiful etching of the Dome of the Rock, which hopefully you'll be able to see on screen exclusively for us. We have a limited number of prints for sale on eBay, and the link is on our website, should have been emailed to you, and will appear in the chat as well. Any further donations to the charity can also be made through our website, fqms.org. So now's the time for our keynote speaker. So you can see the print on screen and a photograph to give you an idea of the view. It's a slightly unconventional view that you won't have seen many times before, but we hope you like the print. And we will endeavour to put the link in the chat, but all of you should have had that sent to you already. Okay. Just bear with us one moment. I'll just tell you, start to tell you a little bit about our keynote speaker. So he recorded this address for us a couple of days ago. We felt this was the safest thing, given potential technical difficulties and COVID, and to give our speaker some rest at the weekends. So I'm sure Professor Jim Al-Khalili is familiar to many of you. He's a world-renowned physicist, author, and broadcaster, and is Professor of Physics and Public Engagement in Science at the University of Surrey. As well as a huge number of scientific papers, he's the author of many books on popular science and the history of science, including Pathfinders, The Golden Age of Arabic Science. He has also presented television science documentaries broadcast around the world, including the BAFTA-nominated Chemistry, A Volatile History and Science in Islam. He's presented Radio 4's The Life Scientific for many years. Among his many accolades, he is recipient of the Royal Society Faraday Medal, the Wilkins Bernal Medawar Medal, the Institute of Physics Kelvin Medal, and the Stephen Hawking Medal. He's a Fellow of the Royal Society and received an OBE in 2007 for his services to science. So we really are very delighted to have him speak for us, and here he is, hopefully.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to deliver this first short keynote address in the first of 3 FQMS webinars to fundraise money for medical research and work in Palestine. I'd like to, of course, thank the chairman of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Khalid Dawas, for inviting me to give this address. And I'd like to say something about the history, I think, of scholarship and medicine in particular in the Middle East, in the Arabic-speaking world. I think what is happening now with the help of FQMS in Palestine, particularly places like Quds University and the medical school in Jerusalem, and of course, everyone, I think, we hope to be able to spread the word and for as many people as possible to help this wonderful British charity helping work there. So I guess I've been introduced already, but my name is Jim Al-Khalili, or to give you my Arabic name, Jamil Al-Khalili. Of course, Al-Khalili doesn't mean I come from Khalil. I'm not originally Palestinian at all. I was born in Baghdad. My father is Iraqi. My mother is English, British. And in fact, my father's family, the Khalili family clan, although based in Iraq, and they're quite a prominent Shia family from places like Najaf and Kufa, originally came from Persia, from Iran. So I'm not quite sure if I'm half English, half Arab, half English, half Persian. In a sense, does it really matter in today's world? I'm a physicist by trade, not a physician. My background is not in anything to do with medicine, although I have spent a lot of my career as a science communicator, explaining difficult concepts in science, particularly in subjects like physics and chemistry and astronomy. But I also have a passionate interest in the history of science, and in particular, the history of science and scholarship in the Islamic empire, the medieval Islamic world, certainly going back over 1,000 years. And that's what I want to say a few words about today. Now, as I mentioned, I was born in Baghdad, and although within our home, my mother being English, my mother tongue was English. But of course, when I left the house and I went to school with friends, I spoke in Arabic. And I learnt at school about the many great names in the history of that part of the world from medieval times. And I think any Arab, and indeed Persian, because the Islamic Empire was so broad then, it encompassed Arabs and Persians. Although it was under the banner of the Islamic Empire, many of these great names, these great scholars were Jewish, were Christian. They came from all parts of the world. But there were names that we were taught in history lessons that I knew very little about. I'd heard of Al-Kindi, Ibn al-Haytham, Al-Khawarizmi, Ibn Sina. I remember driving, when we used to come to Britain, of course I'm based now in the UK, for our summer holidays to visit my maternal grandparents, we would drive from our home in Baghdad to Baghdad International Airport. And on the way there, there's a roundabout. Anyone who's been to Baghdad airport will know a roundabout with a statue of Abbas ibn Farnas, the great inventor, the man who history books tell us was the first human to fly, building himself wings and jumping off, whether it's a hill or a tower, no one is quite sure, and gliding. So I was aware of these names, I was aware of these great people, but I wasn't really familiar with their contribution to science. Now, we learn at school, whether it's in the East or the West, anywhere in the world, we learn about the great scientists who developed modern science, Galileo and Newton and Copernicus and Kepler and Vesalius. These are people who are European, who ignited the scientific revolution after the Renaissance in Europe. And rightly so. Newton is probably the greatest scientist who ever lived. And thereafter, of course, we hear about Faraday and Maxwell and Einstein and all the rest. We also, certainly here in the West, are familiar with some of the names from the ancient Greeks. Aristotle and Plato and Archimedes. For medicine and physicians, you will know about Hippocrates and Galen. But of course, Europe went into the Dark Ages for 1,000 years, and certainly many Europeans have forgotten or are simply unaware that just because science and scholarship stopped in Europe does not mean that it stopped elsewhere. And of course, the Dark Ages in Europe coincided with a golden age in the Middle East, in the Islamic world, particularly under the Abbasid dynasty, whose capital was Baghdad. There was a flourishing scholarship in all areas of knowledge, from medicine to astronomy to chemistry to geography to algebra, music, poetry, art and literature. And certainly when it comes to science, we have to remember that science is a continuum. Civilizations and empires rise and fall. But scientific knowledge, our understanding of the world, is something that grows and continues. It's a bit like, I always refer to it as a relay race, with the baton being handed from one runner to the next. Civilizations handing over their books, their texts, their knowledge, their scholarship to the next great empire that can then advance it and take it forward. And of course, the story of the golden age of Arabic science in particular is one that I feel really needs to be told again and again. Not just to educate the West and to tell them about how wonderful this civilization was in medieval times, but to tell those in the Arab world that they have ancestors they can be truly proud of. And I became passionate in pursuing and studying the work of many of these great scholars. So I wanted to say a few words about their contribution to knowledge and scholarship. Of course, it began, as I mentioned, under the auspices, the power of the Abbasid dynasty, in particular, the most famous caliph when it comes to scholarship, Al-Ma'mun, the son of Harun al-Rashid, who encouraged a fantastic translation movement. The Abbasids were really obsessed with texts, with translations. And this was the first time in history, or certainly the first time since probably Alexander the Great, that civilizations and scholarship from different parts of the world were coming together and being synthesized. Arabic being the official language of the empire, being the language of the Quran, of course, was the language that people wanted to write their texts in. And so there was this 2-century-long translation movement from Greek, from Persian, from Sanskrit, all the different languages around that part of the world, all being translated into Arabic. And of course, the scholars during this time, who came from all different parts of the world, became very knowledgeable, in particular in the work of the ancient Greeks. Aristotle, Galen on medicine, Euclid's book on geometry, Ptolemy's book on astronomy. In fact, in many cases, the Arabic translation of these famous Greek texts became more famous than the originals. And so anyone who wanted to study, who wanted to understand the latest ideas in astronomy or medicine or mathematics had to study these Arabic texts. And of course, many of these scholars then went on to develop further their own work and advance this knowledge even more. Now, some of these great scholars, I think, deserve something of a mention. So people like Dabbour ibn Hayyan, who is a wonderful chemist, and he really probably invented the field of chemistry. He worked alone in the city of Kufa in Iraq, even before the time of Al-Ma'mun. People like Al-Ma'mun and others, and even his father Harun Rashid, created an environment in Baghdad where a lot of these scholars could then go and work and study. And most famously was an institution called the House of Wisdom, Bayt al-Hikmah, where scholars like the philosopher Al-Kindi worked, a wonderful polymath. Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian mathematician who invented algebra. In fact, the English word algebra, I'm sure many of you know, comes from the Arabic al-Jabr, Kitab al-Jabr, the book of completion. Khwarizmi was the first person to give the recipe for solving algebraic equations, what we would now call an algorithm, which of course comes from the Latinized version of Khwarizmi, algorithmus. But of course, I think when it comes to medicine, I think probably the most famous of these scholars, you might think, well, probably the most famous was Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina was the great philosopher, the great physician, but I think more influential, certainly when it comes to how it's helped develop what we regard now as modern medicine, was the Persian scholar Ar-Razi. Now, Ar-Razi built the very first hospitals in the Islamic world. In fact, they were not known by their Arabic name, Mustashfa, back then. They were known by their Persian name, Bimaristan. And Ar-Razi was commissioned by several caliphs to build the first hospitals. So there was people like Al-Muktafi, one of the caliphs, and Al-Muqtadr. In fact, one of the most famous hospitals in Baghdad, Bimaristan al-Muqtadri, lasted for several centuries. It was built in the beginning of the 10th century, so 1100 years ago. And I just wanted to read a very famous quote from a renowned Arab traveller by the name of Ibn Jubayr, who visits Baghdad and visits the Bimaristan al-Muqtadri, this wonderful hospital in Baghdad. And he says this, "This great establishment is a beautiful structure stretching along the banks of the Tigris. Its physicians make their rounds every Monday and Thursday to examine patients and prescribe for their needs. At the physician's disposal are attendants who fill drug prescriptions and prepare food. The hospital is split up into various wards, each containing a number of rooms, giving the impression that the place is a royal palace in which every convenience is provided. Now that's an example of a modern hospital. So the idea of a modern hospital really goes back 1100 years to the work of Al-Razi and the earliest hospitals in Baghdad. Now, Al-Razi is also a wonderful character for other reasons. He not only built the very first hospitals, a lot of his texts were collected together and posthumously became very, very famous and were read for many centuries. Al-Kitab al-Hawi is a famous one. He wrote a book on a monograph on smallpox and measles. Kitab al-Judari wal-Hasba, which was used for many centuries by scholars and physicians around the world. And I think I will end on this wonderful story, which was told to me by an Oxford scholar, Peter Porman, who's a scholar of medicine in the medieval Islamic world. Here we are at the beginning of 2021, hoping that the COVID-19 pandemic can finally be put behind us with the distribution of vaccines. How were these vaccines developed? Using clinical trials. The very first strong evidence of the very first clinical trials goes back to Al-Razi. He was in fact studying meningitis, and he actually assembled two groups. He had one group where he would administer the treatment. It was bloodletting at that time. Let's put that aside, that is not part of modern medicine. But the important point is that he had a placebo group, a control group, and he wanted to compare whether or not his procedure worked. So clinical trials, which are so vital to saving humanity today with the requirement for vaccines against COVID-19, also go back to the work of Al-Razi 1100 years ago. Al-Razi, and trust me, I could go on for hours talking about many of these great scholars. I haven't mentioned, I mentioned in passing Ibn al-Haytham, my favorite physicist, Al-Bayruni, the great Persian polymath, and there are many, many others. It's worth remembering that as we struggle, and particular as the people in Palestine struggle to build their lives, to build hospitals, to bring their people into the 21st century and give them a fair shot at having a decent life through medical advances in health and through the help of charities like FQMS. I think what is encouraging, what I think is helpful and inspiring, is to remember that modern medicine, to a large extent, really owes a debt of gratitude to many of our Arab and Persian ancestors of medieval times. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Prof. Al-Khalili, for that talk. Hope you all enjoyed that. Sorry for the slight technical hitch. As Jim said, we can do our rounds and prescribe medications, but as a bunch of doctors, we're perhaps not quite so practiced at organising webinars. Anyway, so we have a musical interlude for you now. It's an opportunity for you to stretch your legs, but I'm sure you won't want to miss the music. We have a rendition of Multani, the Palestinian national anthem, sung by Noel Harmon and accompanied by Philip Haloun. These are musicians from a small village outside Haifa. Accompanying that music, we have a short video of Jerusalem and the Quds Medical School with a few familiar faces in it as well. And please also don't forget to check out eBay if you're interested in the Daisy Perkin print, or perhaps use the opportunity to make a donation via our website. Okay, let's see if we can play this video. الجمال والجلال
والحياة والنجاة والهناء والرجاء في هواك في هواك. هل أراك سالما منعما وغانما مكرما، سالما منعما وغانما مكرما. هل أراك في علاك تبلغ سيماك، تبلغ سيماك. موطني 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 موطني. الشباب لن يكل همه أن تستقل أو يعيد أو يعيد. نستقي من الردى ولن نكون للعدا كالعبيد كالعبيد. لا نريد لا نريد ذلنا المؤبدا وعيشنا المنكدا، ذلنا المؤبدا وعيشنا المنكدا. لا نريد بل نعيد مجدنا التالي، مجدنا التالي. موطني موطني.
Next, we're delighted to have Professor Hani Abdeen join us. He is here with us live from Jerusalem, but as internet connections are often a little bit unreliable for Palestine, we have a short pre-recorded video we're going to play first, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of Professor Abdeen afterwards. So please type any questions into your chat box and you'll have the opportunity to ask them after the video. So Professor Hani Abdeen has worked tirelessly to improve the lives and education of students at Quds Medical School and has been instrumental in FQMS being able to support the school and students. He qualified from Southampton University in 1979. He went on to specialise in internal medicine and pulmonary diseases in London and Wessex. He's currently the Dean of Quds Medical School in Jerusalem and is head of internal medicine at the Augusta Victoria Hospital in East Jerusalem. Previously, he was Palestinian Minister of Health from 2011 to 2013. He's head of the Internal Medicine Specialty Committee at the Palestinian Medical Council and member of the PMC Haya Council. His main interest is in medical education and development of the Palestinian health sector. So we will play his video now and we'll have him with us after that.
We start really from the beginning. In 1994, there was a big dilemma for people in the Palestinian territories at that time, where to go for medical education. It was at that time that the Soviet Union has finished as really a big state where many people went there for their medical training. We had also difficulty in getting people to the European medical schools and to the American ones. And we were left in a dilemma how to cope with this large number of students who finished the Tawjihi and they want really to go into medicine. So a decision was taken at that time with the advent of the Palestinian Authority to start a medical school at Al-Quds University. Al-Quds in particular, because the plan was that in 5 years henceforth after the Oslo agreements, we would be an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. From the beginning, we faced many difficulties and many problems with the staff, where to get staff to train students in the basic medical sciences. At that time, Palestine was poor in teachers in the medical sciences like anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pathology, histology, and so on, pharmacology. And we had really to resort to a place where we can get staff from these places that can come and assist us in the training of these students. And FQMS played a major role because at that time FQMS was started in London to help the medical school in its mission in finding ways and means to make the academic progress as facilitated as possible. And at that time, FQMS managed really to help us in finding professors and associate professors from the British Isles who were willing to come and teach for short periods of time, like a year or 2 years, in these basic medical sciences. We had really the second intifada, where there was really a lot of problems for accessibility of students to the university and to the campus at Abu Dis. And also FQMS came to our help, where we started really online distance learning education by having the infrastructure set up in Gaza and also in Ramallah and in Nablus. We had really all our lectures at that time delivered online. And that was really a big help for us in order to overcome that difficult period. And then we had problems when we come to the clinical field. Certain specialties were not really right in Palestine, and we did not have all that many experts in many specialties like neurology. And at that time also FQMS came to our help. And I have really to mention from the start that initially Professor Colin Green, who was in charge of FQMS in 1994 onwards, then this role was taken over by Dr. Lina Nashif, who is a neurologist, and she helped us really in recruiting a galaxy of experts, of neurologists from Britain to come and teach us on a regular basis, on a yearly basis for our students in that specialty. Also, we had many people who came also from Britain through FQMS efforts to come and teach our students the clinical method, how to examine patients, how to take a history, how to conduct a physical examination, and also to give them seminars about clinical scenarios and how to approach a patient and how to assimilate the data and formulate a diagnosis. And that was a team from Oxford in particular that really came to our help, but through FQMS efforts and really assistance. So the story is really a long story. Our commitment really to medical education in Palestine was really ironclad that we should continue irrespective of all the difficulties that we are going to encounter. But at the same time, the help, the assistance and the support we got from FQMS is quite really, I can't really say thank you many times for what they have really offered and for the help that they have really also given to the medical school at Al-Quds University. Now we are facing another dilemma and another problem, which is really the COVID-19 crisis. And this is now affecting our academic program in a major way. Students are not really allowed to come in large numbers to the campus because of the pandemic. We are facing lots of difficulties in delivering our curriculum in the way that we were accustomed to. Yet, we are really sort of going through this process as other medical schools are, where we are delivering quite a lot of our curriculum online by using the Zoom platform. But the major difficulty is what to do with the clinical training, because you have to see patients, you have to be on the wards in hospital setups, and again many hospitals are really going through these kind of procedures, preventing crowdedness of their wards, preventing also students from coming in on a regular basis. So we are now going through this dilemma all over again. But we are trying to cope as much as we can to our best abilities and to the resources at our disposal. But one of the major things that I would like to mention regarding the help we got from FQMS is the recognition of our medical school by the GMC and by the ECFMG. I don't know how many people realize that for any medical school to be registered internationally, to be accredited internationally, it has to register its name on the booklet at that time of the WHO of medical schools. But in order to register your name on in that booklet, you need to come from a sovereign, independent, and also have a permanent place in the United Nations. And unfortunately, we did not have any of those kind of conditions met at that time when our first cohort of students graduated in 2002. I can't really sort of thank enough FQMS for what it has done. I think they should be proud of the help and assistance they gave to Al-Quds University and its medical school. And I think also there are many things that I have not mentioned that I can continue and really say about, for example, assisting us with the anatomy in the purchasing of anatomage tables in order to help our students in the anatomy teaching, also in the accommodation of students in the different sites that we sent our students to, and so on and so forth. I mean, the list really is non-ending, and for that I wish all the best for our medical school, for FQMS to continue, and may this kind of cooperation continue and last.
Do have Hani with us, and he's switched on his video. Thank you very much. And if you could, you should be allowed to switch on your microphone in a moment. And then Khalid is going to see if there's any questions in the chat and put those to you. Are you able to unmute your microphone, Dr. Hani?
Yes, I'm all right now. It's okay.
They're lovely to have you with us and see you again.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and good evening to all our guests and friends and colleagues, Professor Colin Green, to Lina, to all our friends really, and Khalid, Anjum, and all of you really. I mean, so there are so many people, I don't want to name all of you, but I can see you all, and I send you really my best regards.
Professor Abdeen, when I've come to your campus, which really is a beautiful campus, it's an oasis within a very difficult area. And one of the things I remember that struck me when I first came to visit you a few years ago was that you are right at the edge of Jerusalem. In fact, it was meant to be part of Jerusalem, but actually that you've got a separation wall between Abu Dis and Jerusalem. And it's quite a stark reminder. For you personally at the moment, how is it traveling between home and the university?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, as has been already mentioned by His Excellency, it's an apartheid system we have really working in our part of the world. They have divided people into 3 or 4 categories. Those who have got the Israeli ID card, those who have got the West Bank ID card. And if you have got the Jerusalem ID card, as I am fortunate to say that I have got it, then I have no problems in reaching really all the destinations in any part of Palestine. But for West Bankers, if they want to come to Jerusalem, then they need to get a permit from the Israeli authorities. And that can be a big bind, because quite a lot of our students and a lot of our staff members, they sometimes are denied these permits on security ground issues. And we have really problems from that point of view. But personally, I have no problems really in reaching the campus at Abu Dis University from Jerusalem city. But some of our students have really these issues, and some also of our staff members have these issues, because as I said, in order now to enter Jerusalem, and not probably just Abu Dis campus, but the clinical sites where we send our students to in Jerusalem, like Maqasid Hospital, Augusta Victoria, St. John, St. Joseph's Hospital, then anybody with a West Bank ID card, he needs to get a permit from the Israeli authorities, and that is not always really easy to get, as I said, depending on security issues that the Israelis always try to put as impediment in front of people whom they like to put really obstacles in front of.
And Dr. Abdeen, just to remind, particularly for those people who don't really know the setup with the Jerusalem and the West Bank Association, particularly for in healthcare, you have students who have to rely on hospitals within Jerusalem for their education, and some in the West Bank. Is that a straightforward matter for them to travel between the different hospitals?
It is not. And that's why we have really decided to have accommodation for students in the different parts of the West Bank that we send our students for their clinical training. For example, the sites that we send our students to are mainly in Hebron, in Beit Jala or Bethlehem, in Jericho, and in Ramallah. And sometimes when we send students to these places, it's very difficult for them to keep coming or transferring between rotations, because not all their rotations are done in one place. We keep rotating our students in the different clinical sites that we are affiliated with as a medical school. And the mobility of these students between their rotations to these different places, as I said, can be quite taxing because of the permit issues that these students need to obtain from the Israeli authorities. We always try to help our students by really submitting for these permits to be given and granted by the Israeli authorities, but as I said, not all of them manage to get that. And this can create, and for the students, big problems where to have discontinuity of their clinical training. But when in the first 3 years, in the sort of medical sciences years, all our students come to Abu Dis campus and they have accommodation in Abu Dis area, and that is really something that we can cope with. It's just really when they go to the clinical years training that we have really problems like the one I mentioned.
Yeah. And I'd just like to add to what you're saying, Professor Abdeen, that we have, as part of FQMS, and the supporters that we have contribute a lot of some of the funding for the accommodation project for the students that travel to Ramallah, to Hebron, and so on. And also, it was very good to see the Anatomist project. Again, the FQMS donors contributed £150,000 towards those, which are very useful and I think state-of-the-art tools for anatomy. So we're grateful to our supporters for that. We have one question from Lena, and Lena, I think your sound and your video is on, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Khaled. Dr. Hani, it's such a pleasure to see you. Welcome.
Thank you
for all that hard work and also for persisting. I mean, you've been dean now for many, many years, and You've done a
Yeah, I wish somebody can take it over, Lina. You know, honestly, I do. They are on the prowl, they keep saying, and they are looking for somebody else to hand the baton to. So if you are interested, you are welcome.
Well, long may it continue. I wanted to mention something and then ask you a couple of questions. One is that in the many things you've mentioned, I think maybe some of our listeners don't know how well the students of Al-Quds University have done. When they have sat medical exams, for example, the Israeli medical exam, they have done really well. I don't know if you'd like to share some of that with our listeners.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the selection of our students is done in a very meticulous way. We always really take the top 1 percentile of our students from the Certificate of Higher Education exam that we call here Tawjihi. And this selection is very important, in my opinion, because it gives you an idea about the merit of these students and their ability to continue in this kind of, it is really a hard course, the medical course. So they are well selected, and then we do our best to prepare them also quite well in the pre-medical years. And then when they go to the clinical sites, we also try our best to give them the best that we can offer in clinical training and clinical education. That prepares them, in my opinion, very well for any exam at the international level that they can undertake or they wish to undertake. And this really reflects itself in all the examinations, whether in the ECFMG examinations, USMLE, or whether in the GMC examination like the PLAB, or whether in the Israeli licensing exam. Our students really score always very, very highly in these examinations, and they pass it from the first time as well. If we take the Israeli licensing exam and compare it with other medical graduates from other medical schools around the world, our students always really come top of the list. The last time that 50 of our students took the Israeli licensing exam, 96% pass rate from the first go. When you compare it, for example, with students that come from the Arab world or from the Eastern European countries or from the Russian federal states, definitely there is a big difference. The percentages there, it ranges from 7% to 60%, 75% maximum, while our students, they score at 96% pass rate from the first time in the Israeli licensing exam. Again, in the USMLE exam, whether part 1 or part 2, again, the score is very high. And I received a letter recently from the USMLE supervisor in the Middle East telling me that our students from Al-Quds University, they score the highest pass rate in the USMLE part 1 in comparison with the Middle Eastern medical schools. So we can say that hopefully we are doing a good job. And that our students also really sort of full marks for their efforts and for their intelligence and diligence really in getting and passing these exams and keeping really the name of the medical school at Al-Quds University really quite high.
Dr. Hani, thank you very much for that. And in fact, we unfortunately we have a few more questions, but we do need to move on, I'm afraid. Thank you again. It was very good to see you.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll stay with us. We're going to move on. I'm going to pass on back to Anja now.
So as well as Dr. Hani from Palestine, we do have 2 recent graduates from Al-Quds Medical School with us, Haya Tahboub and Majd Dabbour. Haya just qualified 18 months ago and benefited from support of FQMS at medical school, and Majd graduated in 2016 and is currently working as a trainee anaesthetist in a major Israeli hospital just outside Tel Aviv. She had been awarded a full scholarship for her medical school studies through the Madrina Trust, which is one of our partner charities that we've mentioned before. They're going to tell us just a little bit about their experience of medical training. So Haya and Majd, if you want to switch on your videos and your audios. Haya has. Do you want to go ahead, Haya?
Yeah, hello. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm Haya Tahboub. I'm a recent graduate of the Quds University School of Medicine. I studied there from the years 2013 to 2019. I have since finished my clinical internship in Jerusalem, and I'm currently in the process of applying for specialty training in the UK. So for me, the most unique part of studying at Quds University has been the final 3 years, which are the clinical training years. So because we don't have as has been previously mentioned, because we don't have a specific university teaching hospital, we had the chance of training in many different parts of Palestine. So we had clinical rotations in Ramallah and Jerusalem and Hebron and Bethlehem. And so while the difficulties of traveling across the West Bank on a daily basis has been very challenging, I have come to appreciate experiencing healthcare in different settings in Palestine. So, for example, I have practiced in private hospitals and public hospitals. We also had the chance of training in local hospitals and in general hospitals. In addition to that, during the summer of my last year of medical school, I had the chance to do a clinical elective in London, in part sponsored by FQMS. And so this, with my clinical training, have really helped me having a general idea of healthcare in Palestine and where deficiencies are compared to other countries and where areas of improvement are, which helps me in like thinking forward about my career and understanding how and where I would be of maximum benefit to the healthcare community of Palestine. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer.
Oh dear, amateur mistake. So thank you, Haya. Majd, can you switch on your video?
Yes.
Good, there
Can
you
you
are.
see me? Can you hear me? Okay. So 10 years ago, I made a decision. It was like the biggest decision of my life to go into med school. And I was accepted in Al-Quds University. 6 years later, I graduated with a degree of excellence. I'm so proud to be a graduate of Al-Quds University. Was it easy? Not at all. It was difficult. Moving into a new department, making new friends, meeting new people, lots of stress. You know, it's med school, lots of studying, lots of labs. The fact that you have to be the best and compete with others, because we're not talking about any any students. We're talking about students who are the best of the best, the smartest, who get into med school. So personally, I made every effort to be there, and eventually that paid off. One of the problems like I faced was getting into different hospitals. It was like both a problem as well as like benefit, because we don't have a specific like a hospital for our university. So we had to move and transport from different cities. But that helped me like seeing the different population, seeing different patients, and be exposed to lots of hospitals, lots of experiences with different doctors. The hard part was crossing the checkpoints whenever I had to go to Jerusalem to go to Al-Maqasid and Augusta Victoria Hospital. But sometimes it was fun. I eventually made my decision to be an anesthesiologist, which was not easy decision. I really liked all the specialties in medicine. I really wanted to deal with pediatrics, go into operation. I really wanted to use my mind. I loved medicine. I literally loved everything. But when I wanted to join them in one specialty, I found like anesthesia and critical care. It's my field. And here I am, like I'm now third year anesthesia resident at Sheba Medical Center. In fact, it's one of the 9 best hospitals worldwide. And like everyone here is pleased with what I'm doing, and they're even like more like they're proud because like I'm from Al-Quds University, and I compete with different residents here. And in fact, like the professor last week, they told me that I'm one of the best residents here, and I would be honored to go into a conference in Prague to present a poster there. So yeah, like Al-Quds University, long journey, but I really liked everything about it. And I'm so proud to be part of FQMS. And yes, I wanted to add one more thing. I did an elective course in London. It was a great opportunity to be there, to see how the world outside of Palestine, to get a new experience from Dr. Khalid Dawas, and like to see how the future can be as part of here. I'm very interested in medical education, and whenever I finish my residency, I plan to go back to Ramallah to help and benefit people there. And for sure, I would like to be very, let's very delighted and honored to be involved in medical education at the hospitals in Ramallah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Majd and Haya. So we've got a short amount of time for some questions to Majd, Haya, and indeed to Hani. I think Baroness Tong had a question, if you'd like to ask that. And so Khalid is just going to unmute you. There you go.
Is that all right now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There were two questions. The first one, I wasn't quite clear about the situation of students traveling when they have to do their clinical appointments in various different hospitals in the West Bank and Jerusalem. And if there is difficulty in that travel, and there must be, it must be very, very stressful indeed for them to have to face this. Wouldn't it be better if we had some sort of campaign or something to actually get accommodation in all of those clinical centres for the students while they're actually doing that particular specialty? It was very easy for me as a medical student to stay in London and stay in my hall of residence. I didn't have any problem travelling around, but I can imagine the difficulty in the West Bank must be just appalling, and it's such a waste of their time and energy. I may have got the wrong message, but I just feel there ought to be accommodation for students in the places they have to do their clinical training. And the second question is, of course, that the hottest issue on social media at the moment here is the denial of vaccines for COVID-19 to the Palestinians, that the vaccines are not getting through to the West Bank or Gaza. And I wonder if it's not quite on this same subject, but if anyone can comment on that, I'll be very grateful.
Thank you, Jenny. In fact, on the subject of the accommodation, I think Professor Hani and us do work very closely on this. And in fact, we rely on him probably at great expense to his health in the amount of information we keep asking for, because we're very keen to support that project. Dr. Hani, can I ask you for your comment on that in answer to Jenny's question, and perhaps also about the vaccination issue within Palestine?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, I think, first of all, I have really to say my great thanks to FQMS for helping us exactly with this issue of accommodation for students in the different clinical sites they go to. We have already rented about 6 flats in Hebron, for example, for our students, 3 for males and 3 for females. And also we have the same in Jericho. We have now 2 flats rented in Jericho. We have also another 4 flats rented in Ramallah. So FQMS is supporting us in the rent, in paying the rent of these flats. And I'm really sort of thankful for that. And I can't stress how important this has helped us and helped our students in staying put in these places and avoid all these traveling times that they really sort of waste when they go from one place to the next. But unfortunately, the number of flats we have at the moment is not enough. We need more flats. I think we need to increase by about 50% the flats we have for our students in order to accommodate the increasing number of students that we have over the years. So I agree with you totally. Accommodation is very important. We are already giving it a lot of attention, and FQMS thankfully is helping us in really sort of paying the rent of the majority of these flats. Now, as far as the COVID-19 vaccine, yes, you are right. Still the Palestinian government up till now is trying to find vaccines for the populace in Palestine. The Israelis have already sort of vaccinated about probably 40%, or if not more than that by now, of their population, and they managed to get the Pfizer vaccine, but they did not include the Palestinians, who by international law it's their responsibility, being the occupying power, really, that they should vaccinate. But as you know, politics is really real at play, and they are not treating the Palestinians as equals with the Israelis. And this is a problem. I agree that we should really fight, that the international community should join hands, really enforcing the Israelis in sort of finding the vaccine for the Palestinian population, and at least for the Palestinians in Jerusalem, and for the Palestinian and for the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners who are really under the custody of the Israelis, and they are not even vaccinating the prisoners. I mean, this is really unheard of. It's something unheard of, really, in this world, where you can find this kind of discrimination against people who are under your custody, and you are still neglecting to give them the proper medical management and public health issues, which really reflect badly on their morale and also on their oasis of democracy that they really try to say that they are. What can we do? As I said, I agree with you that we should really sort of join hands. We should force the Israelis to find vaccines for the Palestinian population, and at least to vaccinate the Palestinian prisoners under their custody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haya. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to have to draw things to a close. I hope you all enjoyed our first webinar. And can I just remind you that we hope to raise a minimum of £60,000 to fund this year's projects in support of the medical schools in Palestine, especially the bursaries to help needy students, which, as you can imagine, in this current climate is all the more important. So we really appreciate your support in these unique times, and any size donation will be gratefully received at our website, fqms.org. Lastly, it's a little reminder about the Dome of the Rock prints. So they're available on eBay, and they'll be available to buy until next week. I think I'll just pass over to Khalid for a last word.
I'd just like to say thank you to all of you again, and really on behalf of the trustees, I'd like to thank Anjem for organizing this with Rita. I say it's taken some effort to do this. I hope you will join us for the next two events in February and March. And just to echo what Anjem has just said, that we really are looking for whatever donation you can afford. Nothing is too small, and we're keen to keep our programs going. So thank you again for attending, and thank you, Anjem.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.